Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are two things that this government will go down for in recent times. There are many others to add to the list, but in the near future, one will be allowing the GCSB into Kiwis' homes. The second, however, will be reducing the chances and the ability of Kiwis to even have a decent home in which they either can rent or own. And that is a situation that has patently become much worse under this government, and that, Mr. Speaker, will be just part of their dark legacy. We know that home ownership, Mr. Speaker, in Auckland alone is now at levels below 60%. That is the first time ever we have become that distant from what used to be a part of the Kiwi dream in New Zealand, and it is happening right now in the city in which I live. Prices under this government in Auckland have gone up by 30%. It's no wonder that people are finding it so difficult to get into homes. And, Mr. Speaker, this actually isn't about the ability of Kiwis to get into their quarter-acre dream. And have I got a home yet? I'm being asked by a Member of Parliament. Most politicians on this side know that this debate is not just about themselves and their own personal interests, but the ability of New Zealanders to own a home or rent a home. And that is something that's becoming much more difficult under this government. And I'm appalled that they would want us to reduce this down to our own trivial examples in light of what other people are facing out there. The flow-on effect, Mr. Speaker, of what's happening in the market at the moment is hitting the rental market, and that's something I want to talk a little bit about today. We are 30,000 homes short in Auckland. 30,000 homes. Now, anyone who is trying to rent in a city like Auckland right now knows that that means they're facing higher rental prices, they're facing frequent rental reviews, and as a consequence, they are much more transient than they have ever been. Now, that means, Mr. Speaker, that ultimately that children living in Auckland are suffering the consequences of our housing market. And why is that? Well, 70% of children in poverty in New Zealand are living in rental properties. They are the ones who are living in families who are applying a high proportion of their income towards the cost of having shelter. Now, even though we as a country continue to pour $1.2 billion into accommodation supplements, that is essentially getting sucked up by these increases in rental prices. And the consequence is that as people get more desperate, they are renting homes that are barely inhabitable. And we are paying the price of that via the health of our children. Now, Annette King's likely to touch on this more, but diseases like rheumatic fever, bronchiectasis, infectious skin diseases, meningococcal, these are all illnesses that are worsened by poor quality housing. And I've mentioned rheumatic fever, and swabbing for rheumatic fever, Ms. Barry, does not fix the problem, and anyone who works in this field do this. And any MP who is doing their job, who walks around our streets, as I did recently in one of our poorer neighbourhoods, saw houses that were literally raining from the inside, Mr. Speaker. Such was the poor quality of the housing that some of our families are living in. It is ludicrous if a child suffers from something like a respiratory disease to hospitalise them for a few days and then send them back to the damp, dingy home from which they came, when it cost about the same amount just to insulate that home as it would be to keep them in hospital. Now, the government's solution to all of this, well, is to allow the council to bypass consent processes, not to build affordable houses, but just to build whatever house the developer might want to build. And the second thing is to open up KiwiSaver a little. Eventually, I'm waiting for this government to say the next option is for us to live in shipping containers or zeppelins in the sky. What we need is step change. That is why Labour is supporting 100,000 new houses, bringing in a capital gains tax, having a healthy home guarantee, and ending overseas speculation. What we need, Mr. Speaker, for our renters, for our first home buyers, for kids in this country, is a vision and step change, and that is something that this government knows nothing about.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't want to interrupt the speech, and I think it was well handled too. But I think you may have noticed that a member shifted from her seat and more or less constantly interjected from the moment that she shifted. That is against the rules, and it seemed to be an indication of an excessive lunch, sir.
Order.
Order,
no, there's no need to speak to the point of order. I certainly don't agree with the member that there was continuous and excessive interjection. There was certainly some interjection. This is the general debate. It's a robust debate. And I suspect that while the member to whom you're referring has moved, and I accept she has moved, it's possibly because she's going to make a contribution to the general debate. And I find that absolutely acceptable. Order! I've called the Honourable Peter Dunne.
Mr Speaker, when the co-leader of the Green Party spoke earlier, he made reference to the Electoral Commission as being the independent umpire. And it reminded me that when the Commission was established in 1993, in the lead-up to MMP, that was indeed